Leaves from a Russian Diary. Pitirim Sorokin. Part 2. 1918. Chapter 16. First Steps in the Communistic Paradise.
After a few days in Moscow I went to Petrograd. What I saw from the Nikolaevsky station was the abomination of desolation. It was as though a devastating plague had swept the town. No trams, no droshkis. No shops open. Broken and dirty windows revealed dark emptiness. All sign boards had been torn down. The streets were indescribably dirty, and in many places the pavements had been torn up. Here and there fragments of torn flags and red placards made the desolation seem more complete. And the people, in rags, with emaciated and pallid faces, the few pedestrians plodded along as though crushed by poverty and grief. Old men and women sat on the pavements from time to time stretching out withered hands in vain.
In the name of God, a crumb of bread.
But no one gave them anything. As I turned into Basinea Street I met a man and a woman drawing a sled on which lay a rough coffin. Very hungry myself and sickened by such sights, I looked everywhere for a shop where I could buy a morsel of food. I found none. I went to my own apartment on Nadezhdinskaya Street and found it occupied by a Jewish family. The woman politely explained to me that my lodging with all its furniture was nationalized and had been given to her family by the Soviet authorities. Might I at least get my books and papers, my linen, clothes, and personal belongings? I inquired.
Some of your books and papers are over there in the corner. Please take them. As for your clothes and other things, we found nothing like that here.
Except a few books and papers, all my property had disappeared. Some volumes lying close to the stove indicated the use to which others had been put.
Please excuse us,
said the woman.
We didn't know whether you would ever return. Besides, it was so cold and we had no fuel to burn.
Well, please don't burn what is left, I entreated. Tomorrow I will come and get them. My precious books burned, my papers, all my clothes gone. Dressed in borrowed undergarments and in the torn boots and overcoat I had worn in the forest, I went to the home of old neighbors. As usual, I was greeted with,
"How terribly you have changed."
"Look at yourselves," I retorted. "You are changed, too." Mrs. D laughed.
Oh yes, my daughters and I wear our clothes several sizes smaller now.
And having heard of my homeless plight she said,
Do take 1 or 2 rooms here. We are to have 2 or 3 communists quartered on us, and it will be ever so agreeable to have you instead.
Now it was only necessary to settle the problem of daily bread. My friends gave me what they could, but they had so little that I could not possibly accept anything from them. Private commerce being forbidden, it was also impossible to buy food.
You must get cards. Meanwhile, if you have any money left you may get a dinner at this house on Communistic Street. Tell them we sent you, otherwise they won't dare admit you,
said Mrs. D. Next morning early I went to the Commissariat of Dwellings to get permission to live in Mrs. D's house. After about an hour I got it. Then I went to the Commissariat of Supply for food cards. After standing 4 hours in line the crowd of hungry people were told that the office was closed for the day. Half starved, I went to the illegal dining saloon and rang the bell. The door was cautiously opened by a lady who gave a quick glance at my rags and asked me what I wanted. I told her my name and said that Mrs. D had sent me.
Come in,
said the lady smiling.
I beg your pardon, but you see I took you for one of the tovarishi.
In an inner room to which she led me I found about 20 men and women illegally dining. Among them I saw Professor Rosen, my old colleague in criminal law and criminology, who was now vice president of the university. Warmly he greeted me, saying,
You will now have a very interesting book to write about crimes in communistic society. Only under communism is eating in a place like this, in dead secrecy, counted a crime.
I shall certainly write that book, I assured him. Not forgetting to point out that without committing crimes against a communistic government one would die of starvation. Being given a bowl of millet gruel, I began criminally to eat. In fact, I could criminally have eaten 2 or 3 portions without entirely satisfying my hunger. Next morning, 2 hours before the opening of the commissariat of supplies, I joined the long line of waiting people. About noon I got, not cards, but an order for cards. I walked a very long distance to the designated district office, but finding there a very long line, I knew I should get no cards that night. Again I sought the secret dining saloon and criminally ate another small bowl of gruel. It was 2 days before I got the desired bread card, food card, tobacco card, fuel card, and clothes card. As a professor I received cards of the second category. First category cards were issued only to Soviet officials and some workmen. Third category cards were issued to bourgeoisie and exploiters. These last, as Zinoviev said, gave just enough to enable the holders not to forget the smell of bread. In fact, they gave nothing. Professors, as a semi-parasitic group, got second category cards, which meant barely enough to keep them alive. At last I have finished my damned card collecting, I told my friends.
Yes.
They answered, smiling sarcastically.
But to have cards for food, clothes, and fuel is one thing. To get the food, clothes, and fuel is another. As far as that is concerned, you may as well throw away the clothes and fuel cards. But keep the other, and something you may get with it.
A whole week I had spent getting those cards and now I had to throw them away. Adaptation to the Bolshevist paradise I found was going to be difficult. I remembered the old socialistic formula, to everyone according to his needs, now became, to everyone according to his cards. But cards, unfortunately, one cannot eat or wear. The real rule was, to everyone nothing unless he gets it by transgressing laws of the communist government. But if during that first 10 days in Petrograd I had not found means of transgressing, I should have died of starvation. Having finished my card collecting, I visited the University of the Psychoneurological Institute to let my colleagues know that I was alive and to find out what had happened to my university position. Busy with civil war, the Bolsheviki had not yet annihilated all university life. My old professorship in university and institute was offered me, and after Christmas it was arranged that I should begin again my lectures and seminars. I was elected also professor of sociology in the Agricultural Academy and the Institute of Public Economy, and I accepted both, because it was necessary to have the extra allowances. At the same time 2 large cooperative organizations, not yet nationalized, asked me to write them textbooks in law and sociology. Visiting the university dining room, I met another publisher, a literary man of great talent, who asked me how much longer I was going to postpone writing my system of sociology. I told him that all my material, gathered over a long period of years, had been lost. The subject was not fresh in my mind and I felt I could not write the book. But he urged that his society needed it and that I should know from experience how foolish postponements, in our circumstances, were.
Today one is alive, tomorrow dead. It is better to publish a needed book even if it has some defects.
He said.
Begin your system at once, and I will publish it.
I knew he was right, so I accepted his offer. Soon my wife arrived from Moscow and we settled down to live and work in the bosom of communistic culture. On the night of December 31, 1918, we held a New Year's meeting with Mrs. D's family and a few other intimate friends. Each had a little piece of bread, some cakes made from potatoes, and a glass of tea with a morsel of sugar. It was so cold in the room that all sat in wraps and hats. Midnight struck, the hour for congratulations and speeches in other days. Now just one speech was made.
The terrible year is over. Let us be thankful that it has gone. Let the memory of our dear friends who perished during its mournful months live forever. From the coming year we expect neither peace nor joy. If at its end we, our relatives and friends, are alive, we shall be happy. May we have courage to meet the coming trials.
We sat silent and mournful. Each thought sadly of those who had died and prayed fervently for those who were still in the jaws of the red monster. One mother mourned her son, who had just been beaten to death. Vera, the beautiful daughter of Mrs. D, was moody and distraught. Her betrothed was in prison. This, together with other horrors she had known, had affected her seriously. Her mother feared for her life, and I knew that her apprehensions were not unjustified.